Grüß und willkommen in einem Fragens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 11 of my battle series of videos. This video will cover the Battle of Eurymedon, which was a battle fought between the Persians and a Greek army in 469 BC or 466 BC. This video is primarily focused on looking at the battle from a figure gaming point of view, which includes the order of battle, troop types and flow of the battle. If you wish a big picture of why the battle was fought, then this may not be the video for you, but if you want to know about troop types, force mixes and what actually occurred on the battlefield, then continue to view on. As is my normal practice, this is another battle with minimal historical references, thus a lot of guesswork will be occurring in this case, as with the previous battles I've covered. The Battle of Eurymedon was a double battle, taking place both on water and land between the Delian League of Athens and her allies and the Persian Empire of Xerxes I. It took place in either 469 or 466 BC in the vicinity of the mouth of the Eurymedon River in Pamphylia, Asia Minor. I'll not be covering the naval battle and only focus on the land battle. The Battle of Eurymedon has been dated to 469 BC based on an anecdote by Plutarch. However, there are issues with this date, and the alternate date of 466 BC is more commonly used. Let's start the video with detailing what we know of the Greek army. The size of the army can be based on the size of the fleet, so we do have a good idea of what the heavy troop numbers were at least. According to Plutarch, the League's fleet consisted of 200 triremes. The standard complement of a trireme was 200 men, including 14 marines. In the second Persian invasion of Greece, each Persian ship had carried 30 extra marines. This was likely correct for the first invasion, when the whole invasion force was apparently carried in triremes, as there was no naval opposition. Furthermore, the Chian ships at the Battle of Lada also carried 40 marines each. So we have a rough idea of how many marines, that is heavy infantry, can be carried by each trireme. This suggests that a trireme could probably carry a maximum of 40 to 45 soldiers. Trireme seems to have been easily destabilised by extra weight. There were therefore probably about 5,000 hoplite marines with the Greek fleet. The next question that needs to be asked, which is unfortunately the contentious one, is what were the light troops, or did the Greeks field light troops? At 200 triremes, we would expect 34,000 rowers, some of which, if not all, could be used as light troops. We know this occurred in the Peloponnesian War, and as the Greeks would have been fighting a similar number of Persians, it's reasonable to assume some troops at the battle were light troops taken from the oarsmen. I have no idea how many light troops would have fought, and I'll rely on the 10% figure. Thus, we could expect 500 light troops, which I admit is probably is not a large number and far too little. This is clearly not a large battle based on the numbers that we can kind of arrive at the present moment. Where this current estimate of 10% light troops comes unstuck is the Persians did possess an army on the beach, so the Greeks must have had additional troops in transports to ensure they had a force mix which could have met the Persians with a good chance of victory, or alternatively significantly more light troops came from the oarsmen. F.E. Ray estimates the Greek army consisted of 6,000 hoplites, 2,000 marines, 800 archers and light troops from the ship's crew. I'll go with this estimate, although I must admit I have no idea of where the additional hoplites and marines would have come from, but nonetheless the number seems good. If we go back to my favourite board game, which seems to cover all these oddball battles, Command and Colour, we get the following force mix. The unit scale seems to be 1 to 1,000 for hoplites and 1 to 400 for light troops, although probably in retrospect the ratio should be the same right across the board, and there are 2 light infantry units here, so I would probably, or 4 in total if you include the light bow, I'd probably expect about 4,000 light troops. Let's now look at the actual Greek troop types through the prism of my DBMM version 2.1 army list. We know the Athenians had 200 archers. As they are specifically mentioned, perhaps they are rather unique in the Greek army, which I suspect is the case. I'm guessing there may have been 800 javelinmen, or maybe 1,000 javelinmen, that were specifically trained and armed as javelmen, but were actually rowers from the fleet, perhaps. As the bulk of the Greek army consisted of hoplite, in most part it would have been of this quality, which, according to DBMM, is irregular spearmen ordinary class, which is pretty good troop types. I'm guessing the Marines would have been the same as hoplites, and I'm not quite sure why the difference, unless, of course, the Marines were the actual Marines on the triremes, and the hoplites were carried in separate transport. It's possible they may have been an inferior force, but I would imagine Marines would have been heavy like hoplites and probably in some ways trained up to a higher level of skill. It takes a bit of skill to be a hoplite or Marine on a trireme in a naval battle. It's now time to cover the Persian army. As with the Greeks, we'll use the fleet to size up our force. We don't have any firm numbers of the Persian navy, but we would have to assume that there were at least 200 triremes or equivalent naval vessels. In that case, we arrive at 5,000 heavy troops and light troops from the rowers, as with the Greeks. F.E. Ray estimates the Persian army consisted of 6,000 spearmen and archers, 3,000 Kabyline peltasts, 600 cavalry, and surviving marines from the fleet. This is my best guess, with the unknown values coming from the command and colour force mix. This shows the command and colour force mix of the Persian army. The unit scales are all over the place here, but I'm assuming the 3 medium infantry and the 3 light bows represent our Spatabara troops, or what the Persians would have called heavy troops. The light infantry scale is maybe 1 to 4,000. We get 1,200 light infantry. I still think the scale should be about 1 to 1,000, so it should really be something closer to 7,000. The remaining light bow represents maybe the Marines. These sources are really weak, and there's so many assumptions that it almost becomes useless or not that valuable, but it's all I have, and at least it's a starting point. Let's now go back to our DBMM Army List, version 2.1, and look at the troop types. The Persians had 600 cavalry, which would have been this type of troop in the most part. Basically, Persian medium Bactrim medium cavalry. It was in DBMM format, irregular cavalry ordinary, which is pretty good cavalry for the period. Some may have been light, but I suspect not many. The bulk of the Persian army consisted of Spatabara foot, totalling about 6,000 men, and with the Marines possibly added in. According to DBM, the troop type is irregular bowmen, front rank, which also included a spear and a big shield, and the rear rank simply just bow. The quality was reasonable, but compared to Greek foot was comparatively light. The Persians probably have 1,200 light infantry, which are probably bow-armed. Some of the light infantry, or even additional troops, could have been javelmen as well, similar to the troop type that we see here, which ranged from not very good to reasonably high quality javelmen. According to our minimal sources, the battle was a fierce struggle, with the more heavily armed hoplites prevailing before the Persian cavalry could turn the Greek flanks, and the Persians were routed with heavy losses. This victory ended the Persian threat to Ionia and the Greek islands, but saw the conversion of the Delian League into the Athenian Empire. Let's now look at the actual battle location and the flow of the battle. According to Plutarch, the Persian fleet was anchored off the mouth of the Eurymedon river, which is shown here. There is a nice beach on both sides of the river, and the battle could have occurred on either side, that is the land battle. My wild guess is on the left, as this may be a flatter area which would have been preferred by the Persians. The Persian army was probably camped somewhere here and may have formed up around the location that you see here during the naval battle. When the naval battle was lost, the Persian fleet probably beached close to the army, and the crew made their way to the safety of the Persian army. The Greek navy and transports beached in the same location as the Persian fleet, so it could be captured or destroyed, that is the Persian fleet. At the same time, the Greeks formed up their army to face the Persians. The Persian army now began to move towards the Greek fleet. Despite the weariness of his troops after this first battle, Cimon, the commander of the Greeks, seeing that his men were exalted by the impetus and pride of their victory, and eager to come to close quarters with the barbarians, landed the marines and proceeded to attack the Persian army. Initially, the Persian line held the Athenian assault, but eventually, as with the Battle of Mycale, the heavily armoured hoplites proved superior and routed the Persian army. Fleeing back to their camp, the Persians were captured along with their camp by the victorious Greeks. I'm guessing the Persians may have held advantageous ground, or even had prepared some minimal defences. As their tactic was based on missile fire, this seems reasonable. As a result, when they approached the Greeks, they were simply taking up good defensive terrain. I'm not sure why the Persian cavalry seemed to have minimal impact. Perhaps the battle was very close to the beach, and as such there was no room to the rear of the Greek position for the cavalry to exploit. As is my practice, this shows a possible force mix for the battle using, well, I use it for the SPI pre-stag or P17CW army rules, but nonetheless they use DBMM troop types and DBMM points values with some minor modifications for the commanders. So you could use this. Now, the Greek army in this is 58 points against the Persian army of 78 points, which means this should be an easy Persian victory. I suspect some modification of the force mix is required, perhaps making the Greek hoplites superior. I would also halve the scale and double the number of elements. At 58 points in DBMM world, that's a pretty small force mix. And so this completes episode 11 of my military history video series covering the last battle of the Greek-Persian Wars. Alle guten Dinge, kommen zu einem Ende.